he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?
That's your God voice, Evan? That's the Lord? You're going to give me that? Give the people what they subscribe to.
Okay, fine. Falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?
Dearly beloved, welcome to the Unblessed Podcast, where we inquire and exposit the mysteries of that ancient text, that good book itself, the Holy Bible. We are not theologians nor historians. We are but armchair philosophers who spent years in seminary or on a church staff and have since departed to make our own way. We invite you now to read, think, and laugh with us as we dive deep into the denominational doctrines of the divine in the Unblessed Podcast.
Hello, everyone. My name is Evan.
And I'm Scott.
And we are two ex-church membership graduates.
Yes, we are.
I'm laughing because we tried to record this earlier, but my ADD brain kept going to like 6 different subjects. And
that's right.
We could not get off the ground. Scott,
this is an hour and 15 minutes into our schedule.
Oh my
call,
God.
And you, the listener, are getting the final take.
Oh my God.
We're both losing our minds this morning.
So
that's going to give us the best quality.
We've had 45 minutes of internet issues, and then Evan's brain was just like, you know what? I want to go over here. So, Scott, did you ever do any sort of membership class? A question I've asked you before, but now the listeners will hear for the first time.
Yeah, I have. And I've been on both sides of this. Sorry, I'm giving the exact same anecdote.
Perfect.
But I'll summarize. But I don't quite remember being a part of them. I don't think we necessarily had like a membership class as kids. That was just basically Vacation Bible School was your membership class. But I led them as an adult, and I remember him feeling like employee onboarding, like just going through the legal documents of the church beliefs. So really boring. I don't think anybody really wanted to be there.
No,
that was part of it.
No one gives a shit about membership classes.
But we had to, because that was like part of running the church was, and this is just, some inside baseball for everybody, but when you're on pastoral staff, you have to like have people, if they're going to become like a Southern Baptist, 'cause that's where we got our funding from, they have to like agree to that statement of faith. You can't just like have them be called members and they don't necessarily like, agree with everything. So there's this, it's kind of weird because you don't see it in other places, but I feel like it's a very evangelical thing, like hang up. I know like Catholics have a whole ordeal on like membership. You got to like go to all these classes and you get baptized and blah, blah, do their first communion and all that jazz. So this is a religion thing in general, but with Southern Baptists in particular, you have to like sign a huge packet of like beliefs and then you get your card. Yeah. There's no card, but I wish there was a card.
I went through confirmation at a Methodist church. So that happens around like 5th or 6th grade. And my buddy was like, you should do confirmation. It's real fun. And it wasn't. It's just like a kid's workbook about Jesus. Yeah. Was all that it was. And I was bored out of my mind. But you go through it. It is kind of special because you go through it with like the pastor or the reverend or whatever. And at that point, like the reverend's just kind of this like principle of church in your brain, like
local celebrity.
Yeah, or just, they're just like, oh, because in Sunday school, it's just like, you behave or I will get the pastor in here. It seemed like a real big threat. And then you realize like later in life, like, what the hell were they going to do? Like, why were they being scary? But that was just kind of like a class we went to, like, every week for like 6 weeks, and then
dang,
we got asked like, all right, do you believe this? Do you believe in God the Father? And then this, that, basically the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed. And we'd be like, yes, peace be with you, or say some kind of like scripted thing back. And we get little little droplets of water on our head. And
this is such a different upbringing to mine.
Yeah. I honestly like that more as like a from a standpoint of making sure someone knows what the hell they're doing, but with it there's like a lot more of a social like indoctrination that's kind of happening to you.
Yeah,
where it's like, you're kind of getting a little bit more. You're going through a little bit of a class that takes, which like as an adult, I would never go through confirmation. I'd be like, no, I'm not going to take 6 weeks to go through.
Yeah, no.
No.
Well, it feels like school to kids, and like they're taught to go to school. So you trust adults, like, oh, okay, yeah, we're supposed to go to school. But then they put you in this class, and people tell you things like it's the gospel truth. And as a kid, you just take it verbatim.
Yeah.
So it doesn't quite feel. I can understand why it has occurred, and it's obviously important. People's faith, they want to just share that with their kids, but I think it doesn't produce the results that people think it does. I think people think like, oh, my kid comes out of this class and they'll have a genuine belief. It's like, no, they just, most of the time they just agree just to, go through the motions.
Yeah, they just know that they can't drive themselves anywhere.
Yeah, where are they going to go?
Like, like it's like you're driving them to confirmation.
Yeah. I don't think that's interesting that you had Methodist upbringing, because that's very much like, I mean, most of my family is Catholic, so I'm used to the Catholic confirmation process.
Yeah.
It sounds similar.
It's not that different. Yeah. Methodists are Catholics, but Protestant.
The caffeine-free Catholic.
Yeah. So, I remember I was at this like big, like multi-faith thing, in University of Alabama, and I walked up to these, Episcopalians. And I was like, what is Episcopalian? Like, tell me about it. And he was like, all right, so take the Church of England. I was like, right. And he was like, move it to America. And I was like, okay. And he was like, and then minor altercation around 1776. And I was like, gotcha. Okay.
Minor altercation.
That makes more sense to me. He's like, that's what we are. And I was like, okay, sounds great. So.
There's so many flavors.
That was a
I'm
great
curious
way to explain it.
To kind of get into today's icebreaker. Part of the membership class that we taught, and then I remember being a part of, you had to discuss like the end times, or like what did you think about the rapture, or like the second coming of Christ, or just the end of the world in general, which is kind of funny to think about. What other group goes, what do you think is going to happen at the end of time? And you have to be right about it, or else you can't join the club.
I know, which no one knows. I believed any sort of end of the world thing that happened, that was shown to me as a kid. Like, nobody sat down and was like, and I could not even tell you what would happen. I can't articulate. I think Revelation and the combination of eschatological things in the Bible that are interpreted, I don't think any Christian can sit down and tell you beat by beat what will happen.
Yeah, no.
Like, they'll be like, the trump will sound, there's 4 horsemen, the Battle of Armageddon, which is maybe in Israel, and the Antichrist, which I don't think is actually mentioned in Revelation at all, if my memory serves, but someone else.
I can't quite remember.
I think that's just a fun little Left Behind thing. But so you have all of that. All those things happening, and even within that you have premillennial, amillennial, and postmillennial.
Yes, all that
interpretations of Revelation and the coming of Christ. and I can't remember which one is which. I
What did
used
you think was really going to happen though? Like, what do you thought? Okay, maybe out of all this noise, this one's probably going to happen. Like, we're going to see this thing go down. Like in general terms, like, do you think people are going to zoom up to heaven, or are they going to their clothes be left behind?
I lived in a constant fear that, like, I would wake up one day and my parents would be in heaven and I would not be.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Same. I was terrified that I would miss the rapture.
And I mentioned it one time, and my brother very wisely was just like, the rapture is nowhere in the Bible. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, it's not mentioned anywhere. He's like, it's interpreted for sure, like, by certain things, but it's not explicitly said, these people are going to be just like snatched up out of nowhere, and I could be like a little bit wrong on that, but that did at least put my mind at ease that, like, we weren't going to get like magically snatched up, there's going to be at least like, there's going to be some big to do before then. Because I think that's the thing, is that the idea of just like you're at work, or like someone's driving an airplane and then all of a sudden the pilot's gone,
Yeah, well, that's Left Behind was like, they had to land the plane.
That's like not, there would be a huge like, all right, God would give like at least like a trigger warning and be like, all right, a bunch of you are about to disappear. Just heads up.
Which my thought was, the way it was presented to me was people would get raptured, like, so, which would, they would just disappear. Their clothes would get left behind and they would just zoom up to heaven. And
naked as all get out.
Naked as hell. And you just zoom up to heaven. But I always thought, wouldn't that be the best way for everyone to get saved? Like, if I saw that everyone just fucking disappeared magically, I think I would go, holy crap, like, God's real, I'll believe again.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point of Left Behind, is like there would still be people like, I don't believe in this Jesus crook. None of that. Like, it never made sense to me as a kid. I thought, yeah, of course, once everyone gets raptured, then why wouldn't people believe? And everyone gets, everyone wins at the end. Yeah.
But even in the digital age now, in the quote unquote information age that we live in, like, I think even if all of that would actually happen, I do think you would have people like
oh yeah
that would be like, well, no, they're hiding from us, like.
No, you see, they've got some bunkers or something. It's mirrors, smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, it's all smoke and mirrors. I was listening to Q the other day.
Oh my God. It would be, yeah, there are certainly people who still deny it. They'd be like, 3 million people just got up and zoomed away. They probably went to Canada or something.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Oh, no.
They're just hiding. I saw a couple trucks leave.
Gosh.
But I just, end time stuff, to your point, I was scared as a kid. I remember one time I was home from school, and I think there's like a schedule change, and my parents just didn't tell me about something. I think they were taking my brother to some after school event, and I didn't get the word. So no one came home for like a couple hours. And I remember looking outside, and my little 10-year-old brain, I didn't see my neighbors outside. My parents weren't home. There's no cars. And I thought, that's it. I've been left behind. I've been raptured. Me and Kirk Cameron are here. We have
together
to save the world.
To save the world.
I ate those books and that movie up though as a kid. I mean,
I never read them. I
read the first couple of them, and I was like hooked on end time stuff as a kid. I thought I wanted to know what was going down. People at my church would tell me what was going to happen. Yeah, I mean, it always felt scary. Like, you never knew, because that was the thing, is they'd be like, well, if you know, then you don't know. So
yeah,
it was a surprise.
Yeah, that was the other thing, is like, I always kept hearing, like, I think the funny thing that I kept hearing was that no one knows the time and place that Jesus would come back. That's, in the scriptures. And so I always did that as a funny, like, whenever somebody would say that they did, I'd be like, well, it's for sure not that now. Like, like whenever like some like prophet is like, he's coming back this day and this time. And I'm like, well,
definitely not that day.
Jesus is up there just like, all right, can't come back that day then.
He's just crossing off days on the calendar like, well, they said that day now, so.
Yeah. I was really looking forward to coming to Earth.
That Saturday was wide open for me, but now I can't go. Now I'm booked solid for another 2 months. Which in Earth years is 2,000 years.
Yes.
That was the other argument was people would go, well, why didn't he come back already? Like, clearly Jesus isn't coming back. It's been 2,000 years. And the argument was always, well, in the Bible it says that 1,000 days in heaven is like a minute on earth and blah, blah, blah. So to Jesus, he's only been gone for a couple, or 1,000.
I think that's
1,000 days on earth would be a couple minutes in heaven. Yeah. So like to Jesus, he's only been gone for a couple minutes to what he thinks. So he'll be back any second. I'm like, but if he knows this conversion rate, he knows we've been waiting a long ass time for him. Like he should know. Why is he getting an extra cup of coffee up there? I'm like, let's go. Come back. It never made sense.
He just went for a pee.
He's taking a long piss.
He's taking a long piss, and then he gets back, and he's like, oh, shit, everything's different.
They got computers now?
Oh, I waited way too long. I'm sorry.
I go to check the mail. I come back, and they got MTV.
Oh. Who's this Charles Manson guy, and why does he say he's me?
Why does he say he's me? Oh, boy.
All right. Well, speaking of church membership, we're going to be talking about the original church.
The OG church.
And the original church member.
The church bad boy.
The church bad boy. We are talking about Saul. Well, you may know him as Paul. And we're going to be talking about Saul persecuting Christians and his... We're not necessarily going to be talking about that. Yeah, never mind. We're not actually talking about that. We're talking about his conversion. So at this time, yes. Saul is going around. He's basically just kind of like rounding up Christians, persecuting them. There was the condemnation of Stephen, a little bit beforehand, where Stephen just gets stoned.
Nice.
Yeah, not in the fun way. So starting in Acts 9, meanwhile, Saul was still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord. Wow. He went to the high priest and requested letters from him to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any men or women who belonged to the way, which is what you gotta kind of remember, like Christianity was a sect of Judaism at this point.
They had a cool rebranding at this point.
Yeah, that was their Wednesday night name, The Way.
Yeah, the watering hole.
Yeah, the well. He might bring them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he traveled and was nearing Damascus, a light from heaven suddenly flashed around him. Falling to the ground, not being able to see for 3 days that sucks.
Yes, it would. Can't confirm.
Yeah, it's like, do you think that would suck? I think it would suck.
Yeah, absolutely, it would stink. Yeah. I love being able to see.
There was a disciple in Damascus named Ananias, and the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias! Here I am, Lord, he said.
It's when your face distorts.
Get up and go to the street called Straight, the Lord said to him, to the house of Judas, and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, since he is praying there. In a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias coming in and placing his hands on him so he can regain his sight. Lord, Ananias answered.
I'm dying over here.
I have heard from many people about this man, how much harm he has done to your saints in Jerusalem. And he has authority here from the chief priest to arrest all who call on your name. But the Lord said to him, fucking go! For this man is my chosen instrument to take my name to the Gentiles, kings, and the Israelites. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name.
Amazing.
So Ananias left and entered the house. Then he placed his hands on him and said, Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road you were traveling. I wonder if he was like, does it sound like Gilbert GODfried? You're just checking to make sure it's the same God.
We heard a voice, and it's pretty Gilbert GODfried.
pretty Iago. It sent me so that you can regain your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit. At once, something like scales fell from his eyes, and he regained his sight. Then he got up and was baptized, and after taking some food, he regained his strength.
Wow. Incredible.
Then Saul goes to the disciples. He lives with the disciples for a few days, learns their deal, learns what they're about, and then starts preaching the gospel all throughout that part of the world. You know,
boy,
the Bible part.
The Bible
yeah, Scott, we talked about this a little bit beforehand because you knew this as the Saul Paul conversion story.
Oh, yeah.
And I made a point of clarification that the Saul Paul thing technically isn't true.
Yeah, I was misremembered.
Yeah.
This whole
so
the Mandela effect.
Yeah. Essentially is kind of what happens to folks is it's a Mandela effect because people call this a Saul Paul conversion story, but at no point does Saul ever say, all right, I'm going to be called Paul from now on.
Yeah, there's no name badge change. They don't go, all right, fill out your ID form. Nope. We need a social security and a birth certificate, and you get a new one.
Paul was a Roman citizen, and he was also born to a Jewish family. And so he had two names. One was Saul and one was Paul. Whenever he was around people of the Jewish faith, he went by Saul. Whenever he was around Gentiles, he went by Paul. Since he spent the majority of his time in Acts around Gentiles, and since he wrote a lot to Gentile churches, he went by Paul a lot, or we know of him as Paul a lot.
The cooler name.
But his time spent persecuting Christians, since he was engaging with the Jewish community. That's a light way to say Pharisees. He's referred to as Saul in those times. So that's a point of clarification, because the Saul Paul conversion isn't. And it's used as an allusion to someone who has such a dark past, or they're doing so much evil, and then all of a sudden they just kind of drop everything and just start following Jesus. That's the definition of a Saul Paul.
Yeah, I completely misremembered, because I thought at some point there was a verse of like the voice in heaven saying, like, you are now Paul.
You're now Paul. Rise. Which it isn't that uncommon for like Jesus. Like Jesus told Peter, "Is like, I don't like your name, Simon.
I do not like that name. Change it.
Do not like it.
It makes me feel uncomfortable.
Oh, hi, Mark.
It's not hot enough. Change your name.
It's not.
I refuse to be around you.
And Peter, you are now Rock of Church.
Peter, you be called the Rock now.
You be called the Rock now. How is your sex life, Peter? My Jesus is Tommy Wiseau from The Room.
God. You're tearing me apart.
You're tearing me apart, Lisa. Scott, how are you initially told this story about how, like, what was the original exegesis of the Saul Paul? Like, if separating, and maybe we shouldn't have read it beforehand, but like, tell me the story without thinking of the verses.
Oh boy. Well, I just remember it was always framed that he was such a bad dude before the conversion.
Which he was.
Yeah, he was a bad dude. Badass. I recall we would have little sketches in church, specifically like children's church.
Mm.
I remember somebody's dad performed this piece, this little number. I think there's a soft shoe number in the middle too.
Like
Now I am Paul. Now I am Paul. Why is everything my friend like a Mel Brooks?
I don't know.
Production.
It's like a cane comes out of nowhere and rips him off the stage.
I can't help it, but they would do these like little plays. I just remember this. He like had Roman soldier gear on, and he was all mean mugging the kids, and then he would drop to his knees, and a voice from heaven would come and soften his heart, and suddenly he went from mass murdering Christians to being part of the club and being the most influential person in the New Testament, you could argue. So that's the way it was always framed, was just basically the power of God being able to, mold the hardest of hearts to, for his own purposes. And I think it was always taught that you should never be surprised who God's gonna use. I think it was always like, well, like don't be mean to that person, like because God can use anybody, even like bullies. So. And in the context part, he loses context at the end of the story and can see.
Yeah.
So that's what I remember. Did you have a different interpretation though as a kid?
Mine was always that there was a donkey involved and he fell off of it.
Oh.
And I'm not seeing that there's a donkey here. Like I remember just maybe like Southern Baptist pastors were just always like, and he fell off his donkey.
It's funny because you pitched this story as Paul falling off his donkey, and I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. I was like, I think he's talking about the conversion.
Yeah.
So we both had a little bit of a Mandela effect with this story.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I want to know what the angels in heaven were doing, because the theology here for a lot of Christians is that all of a sudden people can get into heaven when they die. Beforehand, I guess like Abraham and all of them were just in, I don't know, an eternal waiting room, maybe.
Just some old magazines laying around.
Yeah. And then when Jesus dies, they get justified and they go to heaven. That's the thing. And I came across this TikTok or this reel that was this pastor who was doing a sermon. It later had kind of a more preachy point to it, but he was just like, I want to know what happened when because the first person to die with faith in Jesus Christ, if you remember, is the thief on the cross.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's just like, I want to know what that conversation was like. He gets up to heaven and angels are like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I don't know.
I have a coupon.
I have no idea. And they're like, okay, well, like, explain to me like the justification of, faith, but not by works. And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like,
yeah.
But like, it's, and so we're kind of in this new age of the church and religion and Christianity at this point. We're like, I like to think the angels were just kind of like sitting up in heaven, and now this is like, all right, we need to make space for people. They're coming. We need to make sure we set out the spread.
Yeah, they were waiting for they were probably thinking, oh, we're going to get all the titans of faith initially once Christ has done, finished his work. And then they get thief number 2 from the cast.
Thief number 2, and they're like, huh.
He just goes immediately to craft services.
No.
Oh, there's cheese.
This isn't what we thought would happen.
Yeah, the theology, like, it's so screwy for me between like the past people, of the Jewish tradition before Christ and what happened to them after they died. What about people who died during? Because someone had to have a heart attack during the crucifixion or something. So like maybe someone else died in that little gap window or what about the people that died when Christ was still dead, before he rose on, Easter Sunday?
No one died in those 3 days in history. Not a single soul.
Not a single person tripped on the farm or, choked on a chicken bone. So.
Though I think technically Judas dies in that time frame.
Oh. He gets sent to the evil waiting room.
Yeah. I think according to, I don't know according to scripture, but at least according to
That's a good point.
Christian tradition, he dies in that time frame.
Hmm.
Or no, I think he dies before. But yeah, like that lands in one of those weird wiggle rooms of okay, who gets into heaven and who does not.
Yeah.
You know, do people who have never heard about Jesus, do they get to go into heaven if they just live a good life? That's always a big question.
Yeah.
And so does, which means like, if that's true, missionary work is the most dangerous thing to a soul that you can do.
I thought about that as a kid and still today all the time, how if people could get into heaven with less information than what they're working with, so like if all I have to do is just believe in a creator and put my faith in something other than myself, that seems like an easier loophole than the membership class that I had to give people at our church of like, do you believe this is how the earth was created? Do you believe this is how the Bible was formed? Do you believe that, Christ's death was atoned for your sins and then blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's all these like hoops you got to jump through to be a evangelical, but then the amount of criterion you need to just get to heaven, it never made sense to me. I was like, why are we bickering so much about what we believe in Christ if all it takes is just a little bit of like, I believe that the Son is, God.
I know.
I don't know. It seems so. It's like you said. It's like missionary work to go and pass out Bibles and then hold them accountable. Seemed counterproductive to what they could be doing with their time.
Yeah, all of a sudden it gives that person more responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
That they weren't aware of or that they didn't need beforehand.
Yeah. It's giving them a reason to deny the faith, which then in that moment, once they do deny the faith, they're written off forever. So you're giving them a 50-50 choice of yes or no versus a potentially, what was it called? The common grace, I think is what they would say in theology classes of like, God would give out common grace to people, which included a faith in him that was very basic.
Yeah.
Other things of common grace was like, that he would just be good to people.
Yeah. I always understood common grace as, that it basically just general generosity by God to people who don't believe in him yet.
Yeah, just the nice things that happen to people, even if they're non-believers.
Yeah, exactly. That's the definition of common grace, which is a very lukewarm way of defining that like good things can happen to bad people.
Yeah, it gets into a whole other conversation about the control that God has on society and free will, which I would love to talk about at some point. I could dive into that, but in this story, it's interesting that he gives. So he takes like the worst person, the most, the one that's antagonizing God's people the most, and he's converting him. So it's kind of like supposed to be a flex story of like, well, God can change any heart. It's kind of like Pharaoh. But the interesting part with me, just similar like to Pharaoh's story, is that why did he allow him to do these things in the first place? It's like in the Exodus story, why did he harden Pharaoh's heart to begin with? It even says God hardens his heart. And the same thing with Saul. It's like, well, why did he allow him to get to such a level? Why didn't he have his conversion a little bit earlier and save some people?
Because free will, Scott.
Free will, of course. So it all gets a little dicey. So
I think it's a story that sticks out for a lot of folks, for whether or not Paul actually had a blinding experience on the road to Damascus. That's something that only history knows,
Only Paul and the Lord know that one.
Mm-hmm. Or just Paul. I always thought the scale thing was interesting, though.
Yeah. What do you think that means? Why do you think?
I actually, if you are reading the text and if you are believing the Bible 100%, that means that he grew scales over his eyes, like snake skin.
My ESV study Bible says, this physical event was also a symbol that Saul's spiritual blindness has been overcome, and he could now see and understand the truth. So it just says, yeah, it was a symbol of spiritual reality.
Let's
it
stop
doesn't
here.
even really give an explanation.
Let's stop here. Why all of a sudden after Acts do we no longer have physical allegories in the world today to spiritual allegories? Why are there no
It'd be nice, yeah.
Yeah. Why, if I am not believing enough, why am I I need glasses because I just can't see, and I never could see. I stared at the sun too long when I was a kid because I was an idiot. But I don't know if that was necessarily a reflection of my faith in God.
You stared at the sun as a kid.
I did. I was a moron. But why is this kind of knocking off the horse or falling down in the road to Damascus? Why does this not happen to Vladimir Putin?
I wish we had a Vladimir Putin conversion story.
He just falls off a bear.
Vladimir, get down from that bear.
No, hold on. It would be Vladimir, get off of that. Get off of that.
That's a good point, though. I always felt, and people have attributed to, Jesus said that blessed are those that do not see, we talk about doubting Tom, who do not see but still yet believe. So we get extra blessing for believing without having all this extra fluff. And I'm like, but the fluff is nice. I want some fluff. Give me a little bit of the fluff.
I don't think so, because Paul later heals a person, just touches them.
I'm not even asking for that much. I remember, being a kid, I was just I'm not saying that I need a whole conversion experience like the deluxe package, but maybe just drop a note or, call me something. I was just so tired of were you a kid? Did you question your conversion all the time?
Constantly.
Were you am I actually saved? If the rapture happened, or if I died, will I actually go to heaven?
Yeah. Because people would go, you have to know that you know that you know.
Yeah.
And I would be well, I know that I know, but maybe I don't know that I know that I know.
For real, I remember as a kid, I would be constantly worried, okay, if I die, am I 100% sure? Because they say that you should just know, which is always the reason, you just know in your heart that you have, that he's in there. You should know that Jesus is inside of you. And I'd be is my temperature different? Should I hear a voice? Should I feel like there's something, talking to me inside? I had never felt anything, so I always was questioning, maybe I don't have this thing.
And I think that's an unfair interpretation of the scripture as is, because if you believe that grace covers all sin, then it should cover doubt as well.
You would think. That's the one, they say unforgivable sin is the...
Doubt?
Yeah, it was the...
no, I don't think doubt is unforgivable.
Oh, yes. Galatians.
Unforgivable is blasphemy.
Well, that's what they say is blasphemy of the Spirit. That's what the word is. So they say that the one unforgivable sin is blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. So I remember this as a kid because they preached a sermon on it, and they was basically someone told me, yeah, you just can't tell God, you can't curse God or else it's unforgivable.
Yeah, I always thought that was just being Jesus Christ.
So you thought just cursing in general was unforgivable compared to denying God? People that just said, God damn it, would go straight to hell.
At first I thought it was that, and then I realized that was a little bit silly. And I thought that denying Jesus, outright denial, was the unforgivable sin, but that is not the same as doubting your personal salvation.
Oh no, sorry, not having doubt is not free, but someone who says, I've been shown the reasons to believe, and I choose not to.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate unforgivable sin. But I was worried about that because I would think, am I like, did I say something, or maybe I haven't accepted something that I should accept? And maybe God knows that, or like maybe God knows that deep down I am struggling with this and that I don't have enough faith.
Yeah.
You know, I would think about that stuff. So I think with these kinds of stories with conversion, yeah, it would have been nice if I had scales fall out of my eyes. I wish that so much of like, oh, if I could just have my door open. I mean, the amount of times, Evan, as a kid and through high school and college, I even did this like a couple of years ago. I think right as I was stepping away from it, I was like, all right, I know I'm not supposed to do this, God, but here's an ultimatum. If something weird happens in my house between this time and this time, I'm yours. You have me no matter what. And nothing ever happened.
Maybe it was weird that nothing happened.
Maybe.
Never.
Maybe. But I don't know. I always chalked it up to, well, I'm not supposed to test God, so he's not playing along because he knows I'm testing him.
Yeah.
So it's always a lose-lose. But my rant is over. Any final thoughts on this verse, Evan? Any spill the beans?
I don't have a heck of a lot with this verse.
Okay.
Yeah, other than I think the snake thing is weird, the snake eyes.
Yeah.
And I mean, Paul is definitely one of the more interesting characters in the New Testament to think about because he had such a checkered past with Christians. And I think it's supposed to speak volumes to Christianity as an empathetic religion when a persecutor comes along and admits their wrongs. I think that is huge and is, maybe misunderstood nowadays. But I mean, very famous and very famously misquoted.
Yeah,
conversion
totally
story.
Misremembered by both of us. And
Yeah.
we know the Bible more than anybody else on earth. So
Yeah, we do. Yep. Come at me, NT, right?
That's right.
So come on the show. We'd be glad to have you.
Yes, we'd love to. Yes.
What about your final thoughts? Any final musings?
My musings. I just still think about the point you made about the miraculous conversions at this time of the church. And I just remember being told that was a thing for the early church because they needed the signs because it was in its infant stages. So it had to have that kind of push from God to get going. It just never sat right with me that they got all the nice things to help them with their faith. And then we just have zero things to go off of.
You have Pastor Rob.
Yeah, you have a carpeted gym and a guy named Steve. So there's that. And the story itself, yeah, it's one of the amount of times it was either performed as a sketch or talked about in like children's church too many times to count. But yeah, I just think this, I can't believe I misremembered that this Saul, I swear there was a part where they rename him. So this is like the original Kanye coming to Christ kind of thing. It's like the local celebrity, the bad boy of pop culture comes to Christ.
Jeez.
So what's going on in your world though, Evan? What's cracking and what's popping? What do you got to
play? Not a heck of a whole lot. I went and saw an improv show last night here in Philadelphia. It was great. 2 students from Rowan University performed in it. So it was fun. It was over at the Comedy Sports here in Philly. And that was a good time. So
nice.
What about yourself? Mine's short and sweet.
Short and sweet. I have barely done anything. I watched the Tetris movie.
How was that?
If I'm gonna be perfectly honest, not that great. I didn't think it was. I think it deserved the hype. I don't know. I think it got a pretty good rating, and I felt like I could be dead wrong, but to me, it was way too much. They tried to cram so much of the story, and I think some of the precursor to the Tetris game into like an hour and 50 minutes. it just felt like boom, 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 boom. And I didn't get to know anybody. I could just be an idiot. Maybe I can't keep up with movies, but
That's fair.
Me and my wife were just like, wow, this is like, we can't keep up. This story is, and not in like an Inception way, like, what? It's so crazy. Just more like, wow, there's a whole lot of people talking. Just lots of, it was like Gilmore Girls, just like constant talking. But it was kind of fun. I didn't realize there was so much drama with Tetris.
I do remember
the Russian government.
Yeah, I do. That is what like piqued my interest about the Tetris movie when it got announced. Was I do know that there was like a shit ton of drama with getting because it's a Soviet game, it's a Russian game.
Yeah,
so.
They were fighting to get it prepackaged with the Game Boy getting released, and there's all this drama of getting the U.S. and Russian government involved. But it was pretty good. I wouldn't say don't watch it, but certainly not like one I'm going to be writing home to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Please share, subscribe. We really enjoy people listening to us. If you have any thoughts, you can send them to unblessedpodcast@gmail.com. Is that still the email, Scott?
Still is.
Maybe not later, so you just stay tuned. You can also follow us on Twitter at UnblessedPod, Instagram at UnblessedPod, TikTok at UnblessedPod, YouTube at UnblessedPod, and be on the lookout for the next time we stream any Christian video games, because that's going to be coming down the line soon. Thank you very, very much for taking time out of your day and listening to us. My name is Evan.
And I'm Scott.
And don't forget to close your Bible.